Okay, so welcome to another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. Today I have a very special guest, someone who I've known for probably most of his life, I would say, right? I think I've known you for probably most of your
Probably all
life,
my life.
all your life. Yeah, I think that's fair. So I have a special guest, Angel. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm very happy to do this.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you doing this, man. This is going to be a really cool episode. So, Angel, tell us share your story with us, man. Tell us where you were born, tell us about your parents, about growing up in DC, and going to school and what your education experience was like, K through 12, being the child of immigrant parents in America. What was your education experience like?
Yeah, I'm very blessed to be I was born in the US, so I'm very
Hmm.
blessed for that. So
Yeah.
I grew up knowing the language, being bilingual,
Hmm.
speaking Spanish, English. So I didn't have that language barrier that maybe my dad had. My mom, which is a she's an immigrant, and she came over here about 1920, had me a couple years later in the DC area, Mount
Hmm.
Pleasant, Columbia Heights. Um, so she sacrificed a lot for me to be over here, and she put me in school. I was in school. We're all doing it for the first time. My mom doesn't know the procedure, the system. She just knows everything I'm telling her, basically.
Right.
She can't even go up to the school because she's working.
Yeah.
And so it was school for me wasn't it I- it just felt like I was in a box.
Hmm.
I would have my moments, I've met beautiful people, great experiences, but as a as somebody who's very active, their mind is always going on, very very vibrant. It just wasn't the optimal environment for me.
Hmm.
However, I would say that Lamb, which you know, I went to Lamb with Masai.
Hmm.
Uh, that was I have good memories over there because it's more hands-on,
Hmm.
more free time. They let you express yourself, be creative.
Hmm.
But once I got to middle school, high school, that's when it started to get more gray.
hmm.
Very black and white. You
Hmm.
go here 45 minutes, you pay attention in this subject, do
Hmm.
that for eight times during the
Hmm.
and I would bring back homework. Sometimes my dad, my mom didn't know what was going on.
Hmm.
They're more practical in life.
Yeah.
Why is this being taught? You're never going to use this.
Right, right, right.
I, I go through life.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just wanted me to finish high school. That's it. They weren't pushing me to go to college.
Yeah.
They've always told me you can do whatever you want. And I
Hmm.
think that was their approach to me
Hmm.
because they know that this is the land of opportunity. You don't have
Hmm.
to go to college. I just want you to get your high school diploma. So fast forward, I gave her that, and here I am.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's what's up, man. So when you talk about Lamb, so for people who don't know, that's where you went for elementary school, and Lamb stands for Latin American Montessori Bilingual. So it's a Montessori school Spanish immersion, right? So you talked about like those experience, the time that you spent at Lamb, because it's Montessori, you kind of had the autonomy to kind of direct and choose, how your learning went for you. So was that like the best time that you had in school, K through 12, you'd say it was like those times in elementary school?
Without a doubt,
Yeah.
honestly.
Hmm.
When it comes to my morale,
Hmm.
when it comes to my learning, I
Hmm.
learned very efficiently. I remember, man, these memories are just coming back. I remember they would let you plan out your day.
Hmm.
So it would be like four activities.
Hmm.
So I would plan that out in the beginning of the first half and the second half of the school day.
Hmm.
And I just love that being able to have that freedom of having just going through what I want to go through.
Hmm.
Different for the people who don't know Montessori, there's a bunch of like how would you say it? Not I wouldn't say toys, learning
Hmm.
blocks.
Yeah.
Learning
Blocks, tools.
yeah,
Yeah.
very hands-on.
Yeah.
Yeah, K through it was to fifth grade.
Hmm.
Grade was the cutoff. It was it was great.
And so that was more in alignment with the way you learned, right? So because you felt more, I guess, free. You had the autonomy to kind of choose and decide, okay, I want to work on this, I want to touch this, and you had variety of ways in which you could learn. Like that sort of played to your superpower in a way. And then as you went through the system, from sixth grade through 12th grade, then that was kind of taken away from you.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. And it was it was weird because I almost forgot how I learned best.
Hmm.
I went to DCI and they just give you a Chromebook at
Hmm.
sixth grade, and that's where all the work is. So I'm
Yeah.
coming from a physical realm of learning
Right.
to everything being digitized. It
Yeah.
was very it was a weird transition.
Yeah. And I think hearing you say that, I could see how there wasn't a whole lot of forethought put into handing a Chromebook to essentially like a 11, 12-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the gateway to the internet. And especially if you're coming from a Montessori background, that's a pretty difficult adjustment. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, it's like a polar opposite.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking that too.
yeah,
It was a weird transition.
yeah.
I
It's
didn't
more of
even
a
know how to type.
Yeah, it's more of a disruption is what it
Yeah,
was, right?
exactly.
Yeah, so then you got to adjust and you got to figure, okay, how do I use these keys? How do I, what's
Yeah.
happening here? Where you go from a lot of like tactile learning, very hands-on, very experiential in Montessori, now it's just like you said, everything is digitized
Yeah.
and you just have this screen in front of you at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I had to adapt. I ended up adapting,
yeah,
but it was just more of a limitation. And it
yeah,
makes sense on one hand because everything it's becoming digital. The whole world is
right,
digital.
right. Yeah,
So it ended up becoming a tool, being able to
yeah,
navigate tech.
yeah, yeah.
But when it comes to the creativity, it was that was outside of school.
No, I think, and I want to sit here with you for a moment because I think you're onto something, right? And I think this is something that we easily look past because I do remember that time. I remember the time when you guys were transitioning out of Lamb and you're getting ready to go into middle school. And again, it's sort of like the advent of the Chromebooks, right? Like every school started having these Chromebooks because there was this rush for technology. Okay, technology is the future, so we got to get these kids, used to using these machines. But I think the downside to that is, all this screen time as your brain is still developing, I think that kind of gets in the way. And from a kid who was used to kind of doing things and learning a certain way that was actually working for you, to then just have like the rug, pulled out from under you, I don't think a lot of the adults recognize like how jarring that is, including the educators. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Because Lamb was one of those primary schools that fed into DCI, right? So
Mhm.
you're going from this way of learning, and then you're just transitioning, like you said, it's the complete opposite of learning. And I don't think that the adults who were putting all this together really thought about how this was going to impact an 11 and a 12-year-old. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
It was just like take this Chromebook and learn,
Yeah.
and that's not very insightful by any of the adults.
Yeah, not at all. And there
Yeah.
wasn't any gray area, all of the homework. There was Google Classroom.
Yeah.
That's where school is,
Yes.
basically. That's
Yes.
for your whole school. It could have been like it would have been COVID back then.
Right.
Everybody was on Zoom, everybody was online.
Right.
It could have been
Yeah.
that, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was everybody was adapting.
Yeah.
The parents, I
Hmm.
wonder what they thought, your kids bring
Hmm.
home a Chromebook to go to school, and
Yeah.
they're not just using Chromebooks, they're using Chromebooks outside of school too, at their home doing
Yeah.
homework. So yeah, I mean your brain's still developing, you're getting all that screen time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really do think that, even the parents and myself going through it, having, my kids were going through school the same time that you were going through it. I think looking back, I think the parents just trusted, the school leaders and they trusted, that this is where technology was going. But I really think that it was really neglectful by all the adults, right? To make
Yeah.
that to do such a serious, introduction of just technology at that stage where it was literally just everything is on this Chromebook. You know what I mean? Like you're literally like you're doing everything. Like you were used to using an abacus and doing all this stuff hands on, and then now it's just like here you go to Google and just look it up.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Yeah, it feels like a fever dream, honestly. It was weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But here's what's cool though, Angel, and we're gonna work up to this. I think what's cool is that going through Montessori, right? And Montessori is very child-centered, right? It's just like you're following the child. The child kind of gets to choose what they want to work on. You can pick your materials that you work on. Like you said, you got to plan out your day. And that was kind of like your grounding in learning, right? So that becomes, okay, this is my happy place. This is how I learn best. This is my superpower, my preferred mode of learning. Like you're actually figuring those things out early and having conversations with you over the years. I could see in a way, and I'm speaking for you, and you can clarify this for me down the road, but it's almost like it's a full circle moment, right? It's like you had to go through all that to literally just come back and find yourself. But but we're gonna get to there, get
yeah,
to
yeah.
that, right? So tell me about so as you're going through, K through 12, and they've thrusted this Chromebook on you, right? And like you said, everything's blurry, and you're just going through the system. So as you're going through middle school and then you're going into high school, like what are you thinking as are you just blurry as you're just going through? Are you just like, I just want to get to the end. I just want this to be over. Like what are you looking forward to in terms of like the future? Like what are you thinking as you're going through this process?
Yeah, I'm just trying to go back and really try to understand what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Honestly, it felt like I was trying to escape
Yeah.
in a way. I was at trying to get a what is it called when you get emancipated from high school?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was literally trying to escape.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
asking my mom, look, I can get out of high school at like 16 years old if you sign this
Right.
paper.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, well, you're not gonna get the diploma. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I can take the GED.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it was a lot of that going on. There was a lot of
Yeah.
fighting. Uh, I'm not doing any homework. I'm getting
Yeah.
complaints from the teachers all day.
Yeah.
It didn't it reflected back into the home life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it wasn't all that pretty, especially
Yeah.
through high school. You know, I was trying to escape, and I ended up missing out on class time. I'm roaming the hallways,
Yeah.
not showing up to school sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's where my head was, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that's fine. I think as we have this conversation, man, it's becoming evident to me, right? That a lot of it just stems from that transition, right? So as you transition from elementary school into middle school and then into high school, it's now you're kind of being thrusted into a learning style that's not your preferred style. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like you have to fight in a stance that you haven't trained in. You know what I mean? So
Right,
like
right.
it's like if you're not southpaw and then you're forced to like, okay, I have to fight southpaw, but I haven't trained. But
Mm,
I'm literally in a a championship fight, and the best tactic right now would be for me to fight southpaw, but it's not some I didn't spend any training camp, training this way. You know what I mean? So I feel like you were in a position because you explained it perfectly. You were just trying to escape because you realize like this is not healthy for me. Like I'm in an environment it's not complementing my strengths. It's not complementing, my interests. It's not complementing anything that I care deeply about. It's actually the opposite. Now it's suffocating.
yeah. That
Yeah.
you exactly you summarized it perfectly.
Yeah.
And I just think in the present, I'm like, I I don't want my child to go through this. I
Yeah.
know what what style of learning is better.
Yeah.
The Montessori is more the left side of your brain, the more
Hmm.
creative one.
Yeah.
And then there you transition into this more rudimentary, rational, more logical
Hmm.
style of learning. Uh, it felt like work. As a kid, you're thinking, oh, I'm more grown up. I'm
Yeah.
more independent because I have a Chromebook,
Hmm.
typing, I'm FaceTiming people. But you really do lose that tactile way of
Hmm.
learning.
Yeah.
A lot of sensory
Hmm.
deprivation when it comes to it.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. And I just think it was a huge oversight by the adults, at that time. because
Yeah.
it needed to be probably a little bit more of a seamless transition as opposed to just this abrupt, you go from this to this, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
without like any time to transition into that process. But talk to us about, sort of like the family values and the experiences that help to shape you. Like as you're going through this, I know it's a difficult time, with school, but at the same time, like you have a pretty strong family. So talk a little bit about, family values and the things that sort of kept you going as you were, sort of encountering these challenging times going through the school system.
Well, my family has always been close.
Yeah.
Um, we connected through soccer
Mm-hmm.
a lot. We would watch the games,
Yeah.
but while going through high school, there wasn't a lot of blame on me, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. It
Yeah.
was maybe they blamed themselves because they couldn't help me,
Mm-hmm.
which is natural, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
because I told you my mom came at 20, so she already finished high school. She did her
Yeah.
GED over here, but she
Mm-hmm.
hasn't done high school over here.
Yeah.
My dad can't connect at all because when he was in high school over here,
Yeah.
there was no computers. The
Yeah.
learning style was probably completely different.
Right, right.
So they were just trying to work with me. They
Mm-hmm.
gave me a lot of leniency.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate it looking back.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were trying to help me and my brother. They were
Yeah.
I would remember them advocating, going to school, word for word, my dad was telling some of the administrations, can you water it down?
Yeah.
Trying to help me pass the grade.
Yeah.
Because he would see the homework I'm bringing. He would
Yeah.
see the amount. It was like a day job and a night job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they were supportive. They
Yeah.
were supportive the whole time, and they're still supportive in my
Mm-hmm.
my life ventures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, no. I love that, man. And I think going through these experiences and you sharing your story, I think it's going to help a lot of parents, right? It's going to help a lot of parents. It's going to help a lot of kids who are going through something similar because I think a lot of times it's so easy for parents to overlook sort of what the child is going through, right? Because especially parents who are from my generation, we just grew up, you just go to school, but we didn't have a lot of the things that you guys have, right? The technology didn't exist, so everything was really just pen and paper.
Mhm.
It was pretty much pretty stable. But then you guys came up in an age where, technology is advancing at this rapid pace, and then you kind of have to keep up with it, right? And then for you, transitioning from a more hands-on, child-centered approach to now it's just like, all right, we're in the digital age. Get your computer. You got to figure out what do I have my charger? It's all, you know what I mean? There are all
Yeah.
these extra things that you got to
Yeah.
think about that, that we as parents, we didn't have these experiences growing up, right? And like no one had it would just get your lunchbox and your book bag and that was it, right? And now you guys
Yeah.
have chargers, you got tablets, you got all these things that you got to think about. So talk to us about once you're in high school and you're thinking about like what you want to do after high school because you talked about how you were telling your parents, hey, I could leave early, you know what I mean, I could leave at 16, I could get my GED, I can kind of get out of here. Like what are some of the things that you're interested in, even though school is sort of not complementing your style, like even and you said it was blurry, but what are some of the like the careers or opportunities you're looking forward to as you're advancing in high school?
Yeah. So when I was 16, 17,
Hmm.
I was still in high school and I was working as a busser at Busboys and Poets.
Hmm.
So I knew I wanted to, have some independency,
Hmm.
getting some income in.
Hmm.
But as a for a career or maybe a passion, I didn't really have one other than boxing at that time.
Hmm.
And so it's fitness, sports.
Hmm.
You have to really go all in.
Hmm.
And that started to fade by the time I graduated.
Hmm.
And I was still working customer service jobs.
Hmm.
I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I couldn't give anybody an answer. And
Hmm.
in school, I've told you this before, it was they were just trying to transition you into whatever college. If you wanted to go to college to pursue whatever it is you wanted to pursue,
Hmm.
then they would definitely help you.
Right.
But they were never asking those directed questions into what do you want to do after high school. If it
Hmm.
was in college, then just figure it out, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
But I found I started to get back into that Montessori uh, way of approach to life.
Hmm.
So me and my friend, we took somewhat of an interest to design
Hmm.
clothes, streetwear. We
Hmm.
liked that that sector of business.
Hmm.
It was a calling. So that was kind of me playing with the inner child
Hmm.
that I lost throughout
Right.
K
Yeah.
through 12.
No, I got you. I got you. So, okay. So tell us about the interest, right? So now you're finding something that you're actually interested in, right? You're working, you're kind of, you're doing boxing, you are sort of exploring, independence, right? So finding this interest in design, how did you cultivate that, right? Talk to us
Yeah.
about that. Like, how did you, like, what did you do? Did you research some of like, the top designers? Like, how did you start to really delve in a little deeper into that world of design? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, so back then it was really fun now that I'm thinking back.
Hmm.
I was working at this salad place.
Hmm.
And I remember I needed two checks in
Hmm.
order to get a bulk
Hmm.
supply for
Yeah.
my fashion brand.
Yeah.
So I had that in my head. I
Yeah.
need to, so I need to design. I need to save up these two checks, and then I
Uh-huh.
can talk to the manufacturer in Pakistan. Get
Hmm.
my prototypes, get my
Yeah.
samples, and that was all that I was working up to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to answer your question, the way I was really harnessing and cultivating my passion and my interest in fashion design, I was just on YouTube.
Hmm.
That was my university. That's
Hmm.
how I
Hmm.
learned to set up my Shopify store online.
Hmm.
I learned e-com. I'm still learning e-com, of course. It's a
Hmm.
it's a learning process.
Right.
I learned what apps to use for my design,
Hmm.
what what fabrics I wanted to use,
Hmm.
and it was just me playing. It felt like
Yeah.
play. I was
Yeah.
looking at hoodies that I already own and
Hmm.
putting the measurements, okay, this is the measurement that I want for my hood on
Hmm.
these things. But it was a lot of sampling from
Hmm.
products that I already own. And it was just me trying to create things that I would wear.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So who are some of the folks that were inspiring you as you're delving deeper into this interest? Like who are you looking to? I know you said you did research on YouTube, but like who are some of the famous designers that you were like, you're kind of, learning first principles and learning certain techniques from, from their stories?
Yeah, so back then Yeezy was this is like 4 years ago.
Hmm.
Years ago. Yeezy was very big, it was
Hmm.
popping. This is Kanye.
Yeah.
And I would be looking at their drops, looking at their website.
Hmm.
It's all it's a lifestyle. So his shoe is conveying the same emotion as his website.
Hmm.
I really like that. Also, I I, I got Rick Rubin's book, and
Hmm.
he's the he's the whole philosopher with the creative act.
Right.
How it's a way to live.
Hmm.
With fashion, I didn't really get much into some designers. I got
Hmm.
more into music.
Hmm.
I was trying to music, movies. I
Hmm.
wanted to evoke that same emotion that I would see in some movies and
Gotcha. Gotcha.
in my fashion, in my design. So
Yeah.
yeah, music and movies is a big inspiration
Gotcha. For your designs.
for my designs. Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a different medium.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I like it though. I think it's also it's inventive and very creative. You know what I mean? And now, I know that you have the fashion line, right? And I just think back about seeing you as a kid. I remember seeing you as like this little kid, man, like as a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old,
yeah,
and you always fly. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it completely makes sense why you would go into design and it makes perfect sense, man. You always like clean and fresh, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Even as a little kid. And I'm not sure if that was your mom and your dad, but it seemed like that's just something that was in you. You know, you always had the nice haircut and everything, man. You were always pretty sharp. So where did you develop this sense of and this love of fashion and design? Where do you think that came from? You think it was always in you, or you know what I mean? Is it a
Yeah,
gift? Is it a talent? Like where does it come from?
I would say it was always in me, just
Mm-hmm.
represented in different formats.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember playing soccer. I wasn't a very rough, like around the edges. I was more polished. I was,
Yeah.
always looking for some beautiful passes,
Yeah. Yeah.
making very cerebral,
Yeah.
very artistic. And I would see this manifest in boxing as well.
Yeah.
Very creative with the combinations, with
Yeah.
my footwork.
Yeah.
Uh, that was one of my. If you're adding characteristics to a boxer, that would be one of mine. Very
Yeah.
creative, very loose.
Yeah.
So I would say it's just manifesting in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So it,
That's
it was innate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's cool and it's very self-aware of you to kind of recognize almost this blessing that you have, right? And to also be humble to be like, this has always been in me. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that's always been there and you actually can allow it to to flow
Oh
without
yeah.
feeling restricted because it's just like this is what, God has blessed you with, so I got to share it with the world. So how do you feel about when you're creating? Are you able to just create freely without any doubts, any restrictions? Like what is that process like for you?
There's a lot of flow. I get in that flow state of mind when I'm thinking of designs, when I'm, you know, on the iPad designing, or
Hmm.
if I'm just making a mock-up board, I'm like, yeah, this is very accurate to what I'm feeling right now.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting where I'm at right now because I see the big picture. I see my whole evolution from childhood to, a young adult. I see
Hmm.
how that, we talk about Montessori and we
Hmm.
talk about a more tech-oriented way of learning.
Hmm.
So I see that in my website. I
Hmm.
see that in my iPad designs.
Hmm.
So I got the best of both worlds.
Hmm.
If I want to think in a positive way, which
Hmm.
is the best way to think, then
Yeah.
I'm going to learn what everything that I've gathered from
Hmm.
both halves of my life.
Hmm.
That was yeah, that's how I'm approaching this art now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And myself too. It's
Yeah.
more clarity who I am
Right.
now that I think about my whole life.
Yeah. No, that's really dope, Angel. And I think it's very insightful on your end to kind of look at it that way, right? It's like here are these two halves that shape me, and I'm taking the best of both worlds, and I'm looking at all the positives because I think that gives you a peace and a clarity that's only going to help you and help you grow, develop, and enhance the work that you're doing when you can sort of just, try to focus on the positives, focus on the blessings, and then just try to pour that back out, you know what I mean, without any expectation, which is probably something that, Rick Rubin talks about, right? Like when you're creating, like don't have any expectations of the things that you're doing.
Yeah. Now
Yeah,
you nailed it. No
yeah,
expectations. Go into things with an open mind.
yeah,
There shouldn't be any predetermination to
yeah.
anything. It should just he refers to it as an antenna,
Hmm.
getting it from some outer world, and then expressing it in the physical. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. And that takes pressure off too.
Hmm.
It's a superpower to take good things from maybe a blurry time of my life, like
Yeah,
K through 12 was for me,
yeah.
and to mix it in with all the positive stuff that I've encountered in Lamb and my Montessori.
Hmm.
And this is just a whole culmination
Yeah.
into that way of thinking, pursuing life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's really cool, man. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, I think this is going to benefit a lot of parents, right? Because again, like when you're parenting and you being the first child, it's like, you're the canary in the coal mine, right? So your parents are literally just they're doing this for the first time with you. You know what I mean? You're the first child, you're the oldest, they're going through this process and everybody's learning as they go, right? And there's no right or wrong way. Everybody's trying to do the best that they can. I think what's cool is that you have figured out along the way sort of what works, and you've taken, the best lessons and poured it into this interest that you have. So talk to us about like where you are right now, you know what I mean, after, the experiences that you've had that have helped to shape you. Like talk to us about, like being at peace and the clarity and sort of like, you talk about, producing in a flow state. Just talk about like how at peace you are with sort of, the pace at which you're moving and creating. If you can touch on that for us.
Yeah. So I did a lot of heavy lifting with the brand. So right now there's a lot of foundations that are already in set.
Mm-hmm.
So now I just have to just keep, feeding my inner child
Mm-hmm.
with learning. So last time I talked to you, I we were talking about collaboration, asking thought leaders in the
Mm-hmm.
whatever space.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and I'm looking at a course from this one person, from this one designer,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm planning on getting that once I
Mm-hmm.
get the funds for that. I've ordered one of his books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's it's just keep. Right now I'm at the time where I just want to keep learning
Mm-hmm.
because I can have the eye for it,
Mm-hmm.
but if I can't put it into a design,
Mm-hmm.
if I can't convey it or sell it,
Mm-hmm.
ecom comes into play, then it doesn't really matter. It just stays in my mind.
Yeah.
And that's it's not very liberating if
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of ideas in your mind but don't get to convey it and represent it.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
where I'm at right now is a lot of learning,
Yeah.
iterations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just harnessing that curiosity in me.
Yeah, no, I love that. So you talk about, as you're learning and you're getting these ideas, and are you having the opportunity that you would like to have in terms of how you express those ideas? You know what I mean? Because I'm sure, like, when you're operating in a creative space, you may have like a lot of these different ideas. You want to iterate this way, you want to iterate that way. Are you getting the opportunity to sort of like execute on a lot of these ideas that you think of?
Well, when it comes to actually getting some samples, some prototypes,
Mm-hmm.
the only issue would be the the limited amount of funds that you have right now. You have to keep track of the inventory,
Mm-hmm.
how much you have to
Mm-hmm.
release another collection.
Yeah.
But when it comes to marketing, I have all the material that I need. I have
Mm-hmm.
the software, I have the computer. I
Mm-hmm.
already have previously released products,
Mm-hmm.
so I can shoot it with my camera,
Mm-hmm.
record, play with lighting and all these types of ways. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just another medium, like I'm saying. It's
Mm-hmm.
clothes, there's visuals, there's copywriting.
Mm-hmm.
I can there's it's a playground, honestly.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's dope, man. So what would you encourage like parents, right? So if you're raising someone like yourself, like what would you encourage parents to look out for? What would be some of the signs or some of the things like in hindsight, I think you're at peace with where things are right now and how everything kind of came to be. And it's almost like this is God's plan, right? In a sense.
Of course.
And it could always be, 1,000 times worse,
Mm.
right? So you're in a good space, but what would you encourage parents to do to, if they have a child similar to yourself in terms of how they would tap into helping that child a little bit earlier to maybe, or do you think that it's even necessary? Like, do you think that, stuff just has to go its course, or do you feel like number one, do you feel like everything played out perfectly for you? And then also my question is, what would you encourage parents to do to sort of like tap in to make sure that their child has, interests that they're truly passionate about as early as possible?
Yeah. Yeah. So well, everything is perfect for me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm I'm doing what I like. I have the resources
Mm-hmm.
to continue to do what I like. And what I would tell the parents is there's always a sign.
Mm-hmm.
That's, fundamentally what I'd like to say is that there's always a sign. And if there's a difficulty with the child in learning or their
Mm-hmm.
environment, there's always a class that he's good at. There's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be a class that he's not good at.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just trying to pinpoint what his strengths are
Mm-hmm.
and also his weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
So extracurricular things helped me, get some stress out. So,
Mm-hmm.
it could be music,
Yeah.
sports,
Yeah.
anything of that aspect. I
Yeah.
would just encourage it for it to be artistic. You
Yeah.
know, that's easy. There's so
Yeah.
many different formats and mediums for
Mm-hmm.
art.
Mm-hmm.
So a way to blow off steam and to just not accumulate a bunch of pressure,
Yeah.
especially at an early age. There's a
Mm-hmm.
time and place to get real with your child.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that should be the whole focus
Yeah.
of his educational life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. Let's touch on one of the elephants in the room, which would be sports and football, right? Because I know you as I know you're being kind of modest, but you're like a very artistic soccer player, very skilled, very polished. But talk to us about how sports, so in your case, boxing and soccer, like how those two sports, playing those two sports at a very high level, very competitive levels, how have those helped to shape you into the person that you are, right? But also, how have those experiences through boxing and football helped to shape you into the designer that you're becoming? Like, what are some of the benefits that you can point to and say, hey, this actually helped me, and I could point to it from those two sports.
Yeah, what I liked about soccer, I played soccer more than I did boxing. So
Hmm.
soccer was about like 3 years old to like 15, 16. So that's
Hmm.
basically a big part of my life.
Hmm.
So and with soccer, it's very different. There's more activity, there's more games, not as
Hmm.
much as boxing. There's not
Hmm.
that many matches,
Hmm.
but with soccer, there was a lot of goal setting in my
Hmm.
mind.
Hmm.
There's always another season to play, whether it's outdoor or indoor, always
Hmm.
transitioning. Maybe, yeah, there's always kids. So
Hmm.
you get that collaboration,
Hmm.
goal setting, and
Hmm.
then there's a lot of stress involved as well. When
Hmm.
it comes to tournaments or games, a must
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
Maybe you're just head up with a great team.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a lot of stress management involved,
Hmm.
control over your emotions.
Hmm.
And honestly, it sounds like I'm explaining life
Yeah.
just in soccer.
Yeah.
It's sports in general. It's life condensed. You'll
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
so much about yourself in one basketball game, in one soccer game.
Hmm.
You learn about how you react, how you behave when things go good or well. Are you a
Hmm.
loser? Are you a good winner?
Hmm.
So it's important. I would advise every kid at least to attempt
Hmm.
a sport. Some
Yeah.
aren't good at sports, but a lot of those words, those concepts
Yeah.
are also in music. I'm sure you
Hmm.
deal with stress if you're performing
Hmm.
orchestra. It's performance. You're being put on a platform and you have to perform.
Hmm.
It's right there. There's so much vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think that's a great experience for a kid.
Hmm. And then what about boxing? Talk about like the discipline of boxing, the attention to detail, the stuff that, for someone who has actually been in the sport of boxing, like the way that you see and understand the sport is very different than the way someone like myself, who's just a fan, who hasn't been in a boxing gym and hasn't trained or anything. Like, talk about some of those things that you have, those principles that you've learned from through boxing and how that's helped you in life and also in the work that you do.
Yeah, boxing is kind of like soccer. It's just enhanced
Hmm.
minus the collaboration.
Hmm.
Because everything is just on you. It's a solo sport.
Hmm.
So that means losses and wins are that much rewarding or deteriorating.
Yeah.
When I would lose it felt like everybody was watching me. When I
Yeah.
would win, it felt like I was on top of the world.
Yeah.
But there's just so much context to the match, to when you're
Hmm.
actually in the under the spotlight.
Hmm.
So much training, and it's your life on the line, it's your health on the line. You don't want to get hit with a bad shot. So
Hmm.
there's so much attention to detail. You have to Most of the time you have one coach, if not two. So there's a lot of a lot of compliance. You have to be
Hmm.
very humble, have a lot of humility and confidence in your coach, and just follow their word as if it's the law.
Hmm.
That's what I liked about it because it's an older figure, and they're so passionate. They put so much energy into kids that you feel that confidence.
Hmm.
So like there's nobody else you would want to go into battle with other than
Yeah.
your coach, other than your team. There was a lot of it's very physical, you know. So on those bad days, you go home, you're in your head,
Hmm.
you're in the trenches of your mind, honestly. That's how it would be for me.
Hmm.
'Cause sometimes it would be a whole bad week and I would
Yeah.
have to recover, come back, just I know what you're doing wrong, analyze what you're doing wrong,
Yeah.
just try to execute.
Yeah.
And the way that goes into what I'm doing right now is honestly a discipline.
Hmm.
The discipline aspect that came with boxing is something that it just can't be replicated.
Yeah.
It's honestly your life. It's your life. There's always something to do when it comes to boxing.
Hmm.
It's like there's always something to learn. There's always an angle that you don't see. Of
Hmm.
course, in a abstract world like fashion.
Hmm.
So I think it helped me sort of have a calm presence
Hmm.
when it comes to stress.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. I think it's when you think about the combinations, right, of everything that you encompass, like everything that's been, part of shaping you into who you are, and then you're literally taking all these pieces and putting it into fashion. It's really dope. So I think you got a bright future ahead of you, man. You're humble, you're hardworking, you're a good person. Um, it's in your name. You're an angel. So I think I don't see how it's gonna work out. You know what I mean? And I can't imagine more success for a better person, man. You're a wonderful human being. So I'm glad you took the time out to do this interview with me. We're gonna wrap it up, man. So tell us, give a shout out to your family, man, your dad, your mom, your younger brother, about, just sort of being the first one to go through the system, you know what I mean, with immigrant parents. How supportive and how grateful are you for your family?
Man, they're everything.
Yeah,
I couldn't do anything without them, without their support. They're truly a base, a
yeah,
foundation in my whole life. They shaped the way I am. My dad, I got so much wisdom, so much interest from my dad. He's the reason why I started playing soccer.
yeah,
He's the reason why I like some of the music I like. He took me back to an era
yeah,
and where he grew up. And my mom, she sacrificed so much for me.
yeah,
She's constantly dropping wisdom. And Nico, little Nico, he's
yeah,
always been there. He's always
yeah,
been supportive. He's always been going to the soccer games as a young kid,
yeah,
standing in the heat or the cold or whatever.
yeah,
So I kind of see that as well, how they could have given me a little bit more attention back then,
yeah,
just because I was conscious. I wasn't a baby.
yeah,
He really did thug it out, sort
yeah,
of.
yeah.
But they're everything. They're gonna be a big part in whatever I amount to.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of props to them.
Yeah, man. No, I love that. I love that. So, are there any questions that you prepared for that I didn't ask you?
That's a good question.
Hmm.
Well, I did want to say that my mom,
Hmm.
she she had a very ruthless traveling when coming from El Salvador.
Yeah.
She got all the way up to California.
Hmm.
It was a bus. It was going through terrain like the desert.
Yeah.
So I just think of that and just saying, man, if I just have 1% of that work ethic,
Yeah.
it'll just be game over. But
Yeah, for
I wanted
sure.
to say that, yeah, there was a
Yeah.
lot of sacrifice. Now she has owned the home daycare for more than a decade.
Yeah.
I just see it's in us. It's in the bloodline. You know,
Yeah,
she has
man.
her own business going, and she was telling me stories about back in El Salvador. You know, street vending.
Hmm.
So I just I ask her a lot of questions about that. Like,
Yeah,
well, what's my context? You know,
yeah,
her
yeah,
context as well. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. You know,
yeah, no,
it's tough for immigrants. You know, no matter
yeah,
where you're coming from, there's always there's such a restriction. There's so
yeah.
many limitations when it comes to you're playing from. It's like you're starting out with debt.
Hmm.
You know, it's a lot of. I acknowledge that
Yeah.
from all of them.
Yeah, man. And your mom is such a wonderful person, man. You know what I mean? And I can see that in you. You have a lot of her spirit in you. And your mom is actually, I was saying earlier about your name, but I think your mom is really the angel. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And you're just a representation of that. But your mom really is an angel, man. She's a wonderful human being. So I think that's really that's dope. And you see that from all of you guys. You know what I mean? Like you see it in you for sure. You see it in your younger brother. And your dad even reflects some of that too, man. So shout out to your mom, man. Your mom's a phenomenal human being, man.
yeah. I
And
really appreciate you saying that. Yeah,
yeah, no, she really is. She's a wonderful lady. So Angel, thank you, man, for sharing this again. I think the hope is by you sharing this is gonna help. It helped me, right? Just thinking about the transition, um, because my daughter Zora went through the same transition that you did, going from Lamb to DCI,
yeah,
and now in hindsight, looking at it, it was like it's a very rough transition. You know what I mean? And I think we don't give you guys enough credit for how you handled that because it wasn't a lot of foresight by the adults at that time.
yeah,
We just thought, okay, yeah, it's technology, get in there, grab your Chromebook.
yeah,
But at the same time, like no one saw um, the short side of that. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I appreciate you sharing your story, and I appreciate you just standing 10 toes down on what you believe in, man, and doing what you love, finding your passion, finding your purpose, and sticking to it, and then also just your family, being supportive, and just being just a wonderful well-rounded individual also, man. So I really appreciate you. It's been an honor to know you. You know what I'm saying? Because I've known you since you were a little kid, man.
Yeah.
I'm extremely proud of who you are, not just for what you're doing, but just of the person that you are, man. Like you're an awesome human being. So I gotta give you your flowers for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
man.
I really see what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's you're creating like a time capsule of all these different people and what they went through. And there's gonna be some kid that resonates completely with either me or Pierre
Hmm.
or any of the guests that you've had on. And I
Hmm.
think that's something very powerful. It's very revealing
Yeah.
for whoever's looking at the content.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, man. And I think people can identify with the human aspect of it, right? Because we're just human beings having this earthly experience, I guess.
Yeah.
So thank you again, man, for doing this. I'm really honored and I'm glad that you did it. And thank you for being so open and so transparent with your story, man, for sharing your story. It's definitely gonna be a fun episode. And thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Thank
All
you so
right,
much.
man.
And
No problem.
I
Go
just want
ahead.
to say, if you want to see any of the fashion, any of the designs that I've,
Yeah.
put out, it's just
Yeah.
fashionablepain.com. That's where you can
Okay.
find me on all socials as well.
Gotcha, gotcha. We'll put that in the description. We got you, man.
No, I
So this is
appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Angel. So this has been another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. See you next time.